Ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by Seymour and Graham today to discuss a very, very important topic, and that is it reasonable in today's day and age to progress through the ranks of Jiu-Jitsu without ever accessing instructional material that's so widely available? Seymour, what say you?
I think it's almost impossible to ignore it, and you shouldn't ignore it. In the old days, as an instructor, we would laugh at students who would come to the dojo and do some strange technique, and we would call them, that's just a kid who's doing a YouTube technique. But nowadays, it's almost like, hey, have you seen this technique on YouTube? We're going to now do this technique in class. So it's almost like you can't avoid it. And are kids even looking at YouTube? They're looking at Instagram now, and they're looking at all sorts of so many channels. You can't avoid it. So I think it'd be very weird for somebody to have not seen any online material to progress up the ranks. Um, yeah, unless they live in a cave or something. Graham, what do you think?
I dread the moment that a white or blue belt comes up to me in class and goes, "I've seen this thing on YouTube. Can I just try it?" Because it results in at least half an hour of your life wasted while they go, "Well, I thought the leg went here. No, the leg." So that's still a problem. However, I think it's not like the old days where people used to look down on anyone who looked on YouTube for a technique. I think these days it's expected, and it's almost like, say you've just walked into the jiu-jitsu academy for the first time. After a couple of sessions, you will go online and you will go and look for things that you got stuck with, and it's like, it's doing your own research into things, isn't it? And you can't stop people doing that. And in fact, I did that pretty much, within about 3 weeks of my first jiu-jitsu lesson. I was looking online for solutions to problems I was having, because it's so immediate.
Two classes in, you're typing how to tap out giant black belt regularly.
No, I'm typing how to escape side control.
I think one of the issues is that what's we've all witnessed is that, especially on Instagram and the more short form video social medias, is that the images that appear again and again are the flashier moves, the ones that look visually attractive, and even if the person showing it can prove that they use it in competition, that usually has no relation to the student trying it. They just want to try it because it looks cool, and we all know that many of the fundamentals and the basics of jiu-jitsu are quite subtle, small movements, using things that really are quite boring visually, very repetitive. I mean, how do you even? One of the problems we have, and we'll talk about the book later. One of the problems with the book is that how do you demonstrate? How do you describe framing? It's just a very boring thing where you're just doing this or you're just doing that. Does it merit a chapter? But it's so fundamental important to probably 90% of your defensive work. So in a way, you could be saying that social media is a bad thing if you're watching too much of the wrong content. So we're cycling back again to the old days where people are doing fancy YouTube stuff and not concentrating on the basics.
There certainly is a selection bias because if some high level competitor goes out and hits some crazy move, a flying crucifix attack, and taps the guy out, okay, that's cool, that's legit. But what doesn't get the highlight reel is the million small adjustments that he did to get into the position to do it. Shifting your hips this way to collapse a frame, adjusting your knee here to prevent regarding, shifting your weight slightly to make it a little bit more difficult for the guy to breathe, to induce that sense of panic. Those are difficult to convey in highlight reels. And if you release a highlight reel on how to adjust your hips to collapse someone's frame, and I release a highlight reel with some amazing jumping, spinning, upside down, inside out omoplata attack, I'm going to get more views than you. That's just a fact of life. So fancy stuff does work, but it's often coming at the tail end of a long series of basic and boring stuff.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm weird, but I've never been that into the fancy stuff. I, I, when I see these flying techniques, I just kind of assume that I'll never be able to do that, and you'd be better off looking for more. And there's plenty of material online that is very basic and fundamental, but you just have to go and find it. It's not going to be pushed at you through the social media feeds because it doesn't have that eye-grabbing sort of quality to it. In fact, if you've got someone who knows what they're doing with you to direct you a little bit, you could quite happily progress quite a long way through jiu-jitsu just using online material. I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's undeniable at this point. I was just talking with somebody who lives in a very, very conservative southern state in the United States, and the person's rather progressive. By progressive, we mean here not a Trump voter and believes in vaccinations. So clearly, wildly left wing.
Yeah.
Very woke, I imagine.
Woke, yes. Probably eats nothing but soy protein, if they eat protein at all. And they were despairing at finding a club. And so there were a couple of options, one of which was I reached out to some people and said, hey, the area where this guy lives in, is there anybody here for whom that would be a good match? And that ended up working. But if that hadn't ended up working, forming a training group or a garage group is, for the first time in history, a viable strategy because of instructionals. Yes, you're going to have to sort and filter what works and what you need. And it's, of course, it'd be a little bit easier with a guide. But as opposed to not training at all, it's a much better solution to be doing home training. And then maybe once every 6 months, making a longer, in his case, out-of-state journey to go travel with somebody that he would find political alignment with and getting calibration there, and then coming back to the home dojo setting and training. That's totally possible. And I think it's not the way of the future, but it's a way of the future.
So very related to that, to this conversation thread, is that, I mean, we're aiming the conversation at beginners, kind of beginner learn jiu-jitsu, but it's equally applicable to much more advanced students. After blue belt and maybe purple belt, once the students had quite a bit of competition success and they've been to all the classes, I don't know about you, but certainly for me, I felt myself diverging away from what the instructor was saying, and I really wanted to only do my thing. And a lot of that was based on stuff that I had learned through tutorials, or a friend, or I picked up at a seminar, and I just wanted the opportunity to really drill that, work that. So I found myself turning up to open mats more as opposed to the regular scheduled classes. This must have been late purple belt, brown belt. And to be honest, I think my instructor didn't care. He just accepted that that was the way a student would advance. They would find their own path and find their opportunities to do that. So there's kind of like this weird imbalance where the higher end student is not really following regular class stuff, and the lower end student probably should be following regular class stuff but isn't because they're watching social media stuff. And it's the people in the middle that are just attending classes and doing everything the instructor says. So there's that weird dichotomy there.
I think before we go any further, I'd like a quick little bio of you guys explaining why you have any right to be talking about this, because people, unless they live in the UK, probably aren't going to be familiar with you. Or actually, they might be familiar with you, Seymour. They just might not know that they're familiar with you.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I'm Seymour, and I'm probably better known online as Meerkatsu. Originally, I started Jiu-Jitsu in 2003, so that's 23 years ago, as a result of training Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu was very big. It was very popular. It was like the Kung Fu and Karate of its era. But the first Gracie clubs, or Gracie-trained people, were coming over to the UK to showcase Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu as they were calling it. And obviously our interest peaked. Some people had seen the UFC, some people hadn't. I hadn't seen it. I just heard that there was this Brazilian version of Jiu-Jitsu. I tried my first club and I was instantly hooked. I thought, this is really cool. We get to spar, we get to learn techniques. The instructor was a Brazilian guy. He was huge, and he was a bouncer as well, which really helped the image of this tough guy thing, which Japanese Jiu-Jitsu has many merits, but for its faults, it doesn't do sparring. Well, we didn't do sparring, and the techniques were very predictable. So punch me here, no here, and then I can block it, and the old cliche. So that was my origin story. But I've always been an artist. I've always illustrated for fun, sometimes for commissions, and over time, people got to find out that I could do drawings and create artwork. So I became known for creating rash guards and gis, flyers, posters, club mascots, badges, everything, until it became a business. And now I sell my own fightwear. Ironically, I'm not wearing one of my own. I should have thought better and branded myself better. I'm wearing another artist called Painting Demons. But anyway, as a result of that, I built up a bit of a social media following. I started up a blog. I also was quite well known for writing reviews of instructionals, reviews of gis, kimonos, anything, just because I'm a little nerdy like that. I just can't watch something on Netflix without writing a review of it on Facebook. Graham will have read it and probably protested that I was wrong in my opinion about this film, or I don't know, something. It's just one of those things. Anyway, I shouldn't be revealing all that. I'm showing how nerdy I'm. I'm supposed to be cool, right? Being an artist is cool. Anyway, I now instruct. I'm a third degree black belt now. My instructor was one of the pioneers of on the British scene here called Nick Brooks. He himself was a black belt under Roger Gracie. He was one of Roger Gracie's first black belts, and he got his black belt in 5 years, and then he opened up his club, and I learned from Nick. And Roger would come down quite frequently to teach seminars. Nick passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago. I'm really happy that I was able to get my black belt from Nick. And I started teaching myself. So we run a club in my town, along with my business partner Sandeep. He's also a black belt, and we're doing very well actually. It's good fun. I love teaching. I love drawing. I love just everything to do with jiu-jitsu and the subculture of the art. Apart from the idiots, of course. Right. I gloss over the idiots. Anyway, sorry, Graham. I hogged the.
I'm not as exciting as you, not as jiu-jitsu famous as you are. How do I follow that? Yeah, I'm a well-loved figure within the jiu-jitsu community, and well, so I actually started martial arts in 1993 with Tai Chi, which, you know, the martial art of old people in parks, the deadly fighting art of China. But the group I was in, which was in North London at the time, they were quite fighty. They would spar all the time, and I loved it. It was fantastic, and I got a real bug for martial arts after that, which started with the David Carradine Kung Fu series in the 70s, which captured my imagination, you know, and that was it, really. But it wasn't until I found this Tai Chi group that I actually found something that embodied that philosophy and fighting, put it all together into sort of an exercise system as well, which is nice. It's sort of like a soft martial art, you'd call it, which, you know, I think later on when I found Jiu-Jitsu, it had the same similar qualities of being pliable and flexible rather than just brute force against force. So I guess to me it's all part of the same continuum. So I started in the 90s with Tai Chi, Kung Fu, and then around 2011 I guess I had a bit of a midlife crisis and decided I needed a bit more of a challenge, a bit more of a physical challenge. I couldn't find anybody. I started teaching Tai Chi at this point and Kung Fu, but with Tai Chi it's really hard to find anyone who wants to spar. That's the major issue. And I spent years trying to turn people who weren't really that martial into martial people to train with. And in the end, I realised that if I just went to a jiu-jitsu academy, there were like 30 guys who all wanted to rip my head off. So that was a problem solved. It was just so much easier. And also, I really enjoy clever techniques of leverage and, you know, technique over strength. That kind of side to things. I really enjoy that. So I started in 2011 with Salvatore Pace in Bath in the United Kingdom and stayed with him all the way through to black belt. I train at Gracie Barrow in Keynsham now. And I also, my day job is a writer. I'm a technology writer. So I write about mainly AI these days. That's changed. Well, I used to be a magazine editor back in the days when print ruled everything. And then now it's all online and the web. So I've got a long experience of technology magazines that I used to edit and work on. And I carried on writing about Tai Chi. So I've got according to FeedSpot, I have the UK's #1 Tai Chi blog, which is the Tai Chi Notebook, which somebody might have heard of. I've got a Tai Chi Notebook podcast, which actually registered as the 7th biggest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu podcast in their chart as well. So I've had you on there, Stephan, and I've had Seymour on there. So I've had a few jiu-jitsu people on there too. So I think I cross all boundaries.
I have to ask, when you say sparring in a Tai Chi context, are you talking about push hands or are you talking about something different?
No, I'm talking about putting on headgear and mitts and punching each other.
Wow. So how on earth did the first group that you were training with decide that this was a good idea? This seems very un-Tai Chi like.
Chinese guy from Hong Kong, Master Lam Kam Chuen, comes to Britain to teach Tai Chi on some sort of scholarship type of arrangement. He just won the Southeast Asian Martial Arts Championship, which was way before Pride and before the UFC. This is like 70s, I think, or early 80s or late 70s. So that was a hardcore fighting championship. And he came to Britain and he had this idea that it was the Kung Fu boom at the time. So it would have been late 70s. He had the idea that he was going to teach a load of British people how to fight using Kung Fu and become famous and make a big name for himself. But unfortunately, the Kung Fu boom died just as he got here. So he's transitioned a little bit into healing and health type things, and the Tai Chi, Qigong, that side of things. However, he'd already started training about like this core group of people in the actual martial arts. And obviously the only way to do actual martial arts is to spar. And then you need to have a bit of full contact if you're going to ever understand what it's really like. So he'd been training them all, and he just carried on training them, even though he kind of switched to a more gentler side of things. And my teacher was one of those guys. So he spent about 10 years with him in London through the 80s, learning fighting, including weapons too. To this day, I will never pick up a stick when I'm near him, because as soon as you pick up a stick, he goes, "Oh, got to fight with it," and starts fighting you with the stick. So, so it's just he's very good at that, very good. But I think it was quite brutal. Health and safety wasn't a thing back in the 70s. People were getting knocked out and things broken, and by the time I got to train, it had been made safer, shall we say. We had protective gear, a little bit, So it wasn't as bad. Although I did get knocked out once, and that wasn't very much fun at all. That was actually from a Japanese jiu-jitsu judo throw, osotogari, in a sparring session against someone who was a judo black belt, and I didn't know they were a judo black belt. And I tried to grapple them, and that was a mistake. And then I realised I had this massive hole in my grappling knowledge at that point, and so I'd always been interested in jiu-jitsu, and then I kind of had the chance to train it, and I just instantly loved the whole idea, because it was all the clever things of Tai Chi, leverage, using skill rather than just brute force. You had a lovely mat to train on, That was nice, because when I got knocked out, we were sparring on a hard floor. That's why I got knocked out. I did a break fall, but it doesn't matter when you're not on a on a mat. Your head still bangs off the hard wooden floor. So it was having those sort of nicer training facilities was a revelation for me. So I really jumped in with both feet.
I remember reading the book Chinese Boxing Masters and Methods. I want to say it by Robert Smith. And he talked a lot about the fighting culture in Tai Chi back in Hong Kong. And I think he also was in mainland China. And there really was a large contingent of people who were basically tough guys and fighters and brutes who fought under the Tai Chi banner. But they were basically thugs and street fighters as well. So it's just interesting that there was this tradition that's never, ever acknowledged by anyone running a Tai Chi studio. And certainly, much as I respect them, by the 70-year-old Asian ladies in the park with their boombox playing Chinese music on a Sunday morning. That's great. I'm thrilled to see them, but I wouldn't be too worried about being attacked by one of those 70-year-old ladies for a variety of reasons.
I don't know. You never underestimate your opponent, Stephan. That's what I say.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. I've seen plenty of people who don't look like they're particularly dangerous, and then you touch hands with them, and then you kind of realise they've got a lot of skill. So I don't like to ever try and underestimate anybody. But yes, I think Robert Smith was in Taiwan actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're right. Sorry.
Before communism came, communism kind of kicked them out to Taiwan, and a lot of the nationalists who went there were in the army and they were martial artists, and so they kind of brought their martial culture to Taiwan, which then had a flourishing of martial arts, which were then sort of banned on the mainland during the Cultural Revolution. So it's got a distinct flavour to Taiwanese martial arts. Hong Kong, again, because Britain had it, that had its own distinct flavour of Chinese martial arts. And then you have these little diaspora around the world where martial traditions have survived. And there's all sorts of variations. It's like a massive field. And some of those guys can fight. I mean, without a doubt. You know, and nasty fighting too. It's not... It's breaking things fighting. They're not necessarily going to respect a sporting tradition, you know.
So to change gears and talk about jiu-jitsu rather than thuggish Tai Chi, you guys wrote a book, and we're going to get into talking about the process of writing the book and what's in it. But if you're writing a book on jiu-jitsu, and this I know from a couple of my own projects, one of the first things you have to do is to organize what it's going to look like. And this then leads to the larger question of how do you organize Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? I mean, when I started learning it, probably when you guys started learning it, it was like, here's a technique, here's another technique, here's another technique, figure it out. And it was quite a few years in that I started trying to systematize it in my brain and started thinking about it as a positional game, right? You've got mount, you need a couple of answers from there. You've got side control, you need a couple of answers from there, offensive and defensive, what if you're on top, what if you're on bottom. But when you think about organizing jiu-jitsu into some kind of taxonomy of positions and techniques and principles, what goes through your brain? I'll throw this out to Seymour because Graham and I have been rambling about traditional Chinese martial arts.
The book, the origin story of the book was that it was a joke. I just did obviously I have to find things to post on social media almost on a daily basis. So April Fool's was coming up. So I thought, let's make a mock-up of a book that I'm writing, full of my drawings. There was no plan. There was no inside pages. It was just a picture that I traced over a photograph of mine. And I put it out. They gave it a title, something book on Brazilian Jiu. Put it on social media. I thought, haha, it's funny. This is a book. And it probably had several thousand likes and at least a couple of hundred comments going, where can I buy this book? And it dawned on me that, people actually do want a book on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, there's plenty of choices out there already. So it surprised me that there was this latent demand. I sat on the idea. I wrote a couple of pages. I'm not a writer, as Graham will testify. I try my best, but I'm an artist. So the book was mainly an idea to show off some drawings. It was meant to be a coffee table book with maybe 20 drawings, and people would buy it, and that would be it. But I shared one of the mock-ups on another social media post I put a few months later, and Graham saw it and said, you spelled this wrong, and you should have restructured this right. By the way, I'd only met Graham once prior to this. We were online. We were aware of each other online. You have one of two reactions when you get someone who points out your mistakes. You either go, well, screw you, I'm doing it my way, or going, this guy seems to know what he's talking about. So we started talking, and that's where Graham came on board with the project. But I had no plan. I had no plan for how to fill the pages, and that's where Graham's expertise came in. So I'll let you take over with how.
I came in with a... So I saw your social media post about the book, and it was a bit forlorn. It was a bit like, this is what a page would look like for my book, and it's taken us about 3 months to produce these couple of pages, and we'll never do a book. It's impossible. And I just saw that and realised that if I got on board, we could do this book, we could make it, and I know how to make this work. Years of experience making magazines has taught me the process you need to go through to get various visually attractive and giving information through a visual medium, how to structure it all into a workflow, and how to produce a finished whole piece at the end. It's not something you can just wander into. You kind of have to know how to do that. And again, an instruction book like this isn't like writing a novel, because it's not just text going along. It's step-by-step walkthroughs of technique. So I saw Seymour's post, and I just thought, do you know what? I've always wanted to do a jiu-jitsu book. I'm just going to crowbar my way into this. So I just said to him, look, this looks great, but you're doing all these things wrong. And if you got me on board, we could make this work, and we could get it done in, I say, 6 months tops. How long did it take in the end? It was
A little bit longer than 6 months, but we were at it pretty much every night. I would do a drawing, send the drawing to Graham. He would then realize how it would fit into the page, and then write the appropriate text to go along with it. But I think the writing itself wasn't the hardest, but the planning, because the structure of the book, which was what Stephen's original question is. You had this genius idea of the map. I'm going to share it.
Flat plan, it's called.
The flat plan, yeah. I'm going to click share and see if it comes up in here.
Every magazine in the world has a flat plan, and it looks something like this.
Yeah. So everything in black is completed, but before it was, each box was obviously blank, and it would be color coded according to what we've done in the production process. I knew nothing of this idea. I was literally just going to go page by page with Graham until we thought we'd finished. But having a flat plan and writing everything in advance is an absolute genius godsend, because
it's a visual way to see your book.
I can say, look, I did a little bit on page 206. Can you have a look at it? I go, yeah, but it doesn't fit in with page 207. I go, oh yeah, sure, of course.
I think if I had known about this approach, then my first physical book, Nonstop Jiu-Jitsu, would not have taken 4.5 years to write.
Yeah, it's a streamlined approach to actually producing a finished thing at the end. Because if you think about magazines, it's like doing a book every month. I mean, there's a team of people doing it, but you're in a process, like a production line. And when one's finishing, the next one's starting, and one, that's been fine-tuned, that process of pages and going through version numbers and storing everything centrally and having different folders where you can give, you can work on a document, it goes to the writer, they work on it, goes to the production person, they work on it, goes to the art person, they do their bits, and then there's an eventual sign-off by an editor. I mean, there were only 2 of us on this project, so we had to kind of wear different hats. Obviously, art was Seymour. I was more production and writing, and he was editing and art. So we both sort of juggled those roles, and it kind of worked, I think.
Can you hold it up so that people can see it? If you have a copy. Oh,
this is the cover. It's a bit. Let's get it in shot there. It's a bit glary, but I think what's interesting.
That looks massive.
It's a hefty.
How much does it weigh?
1.2 kilograms. Not that I weighed it, but 1.21 kilograms.
Good Lord.
And so the inside pages would be, the structure is that you would have an introductory text with a concept that we wanted to convey. We can talk in more detail about why we pick these certain concepts and positions. So for example, this page I just randomly opened up. You have to have a chapter on what to do when you stand up, because obviously in Jiu-Jitsu we all start standing up, even though we like to flop on our bottoms eventually. And so we gave a lot of respect to the history of judo and wrestling and how it fits in with jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of content to talk about here. You could argue you can write a whole book on each chapter. You could write a whole book on the guard, a whole book on sweeping, but even stand up alone is an immense. And then we dive straight into some step-throughs, walkthroughs, where number 1, hold your hand here, number 2, pull here, number 3, throw them here, with arrows, and there's some captions to describe that. The difficulty was what not to put in rather than what to put in, because there's so much material out there. And I think Graham and I would have fairly long debates about, should we add this technique? Should we add that technique? Is that even a technique? We kind of covered that earlier on. Do we do that later? There was a lot of, I think that's where it took the longest, was the planning of this book and how we would depict it, what we would include. We even have a whole chapter on pulling guard, which very few books cover. I think it's so important. You look, the Brasileiras are on right now. You watch the matches, everyone's pulling guard. Why isn't it talked about? We talk about it here. We even give you techniques to how to deal with it. We're very proud of that. We're a guard puller. I'm a guard puller. I don't know about
How
Graham.
to pull guard and how to counter pulling guard,
Absolutely.
I noticed.
Yeah, it's all covered. So we're trying to bring this book right up to date to the modern game without it verging towards just modern jiu-jitsu, which people are referring to. What they refer to is actually professional rules, submission only. Your average white belt student coming in, your mum with 2 kids or whatever, they're not interested in that. They just want a book they can hold up and then, what is this pulling guard business? And they can read about it.
Heel slipping their way out of a reverse heel hook applied from the fully locked in 411. Okay, no, that's for the professionals, and I think it's dumb for the professionals to do. Mother of 2 who showed up in jiu-jitsu class isn't going to be heel slipping her way out of a in reverse heel hook from fully locked on 411 position the way the pros might. Like, that's just, there's a risk profile that maybe a professional athlete is willing to take, and hopefully it's not take that risk all the time, but take that risk in the finals of ADCC or something.
Yeah.
Versus
Absolutely.
the person who has a full-time job or has to carry children at some point. That risk profile is going to be really different. And I thought your selection of techniques really reflected the core of jiu-jitsu, call it.
We basically just copied your book, Roadmap of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and
Well, you fleshed it out pretty damn well then.
We had to choose, especially with the stand-up, because there are so many stand-up techniques. One thing that we made a conscious choice was not to include the hip throw, because I don't think it's particularly high percentage in jiu-jitsu. I mean, you know, you can do hip throws, it's fine, it works, but what we've gone for is the things that we both felt were the most useful and the things that people should focus on more. Also, I don't think the world needs another jiu-jitsu book explaining how to do a hip throw, because...
Well, the hip throw is interesting because the hip throw does work in self-defense, and it sometimes works in judo with that upright posture. Try to get to my hips when I'm taking the standard jiu-jitsu posture, bent over at the waist with both arms straight. It's never going to work. We could write an entire book about Gracie self-defense techniques that don't work in MMA and don't work in jiu-jitsu. And I've already gotten attacked by Gracie family members for making that inflammatory statement. So what do I have left to lose?
that's not a surprise. I think one of the things we purposely didn't include in the book, which you could argue doesn't make it a fully comprehensive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu book, is any mention of self-defense. I don't think we did we, Graham?
We talk about applications for MMA now and again.
Yes, but not self-defense.
Not, yeah.
I don't think that word is even in there. I mean, I think that our forefathers of the sport will be looking down and wagging their finger at me. But as I say, we wanted to make it relevant to the modern age.
For what people actually do.
Your
Yeah.
average jiu-jitsu academy may have a self-defense curriculum, but it's very peripheral to what the kids and the adults want to do, which is sparring and maybe the odd competition and learning how to do escape from mount and all the fun stuff.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you had somebody who's only ever trained sport jiu-jitsu and they've done the most sporty of the sport jiu-jitsu, they're only berimbolos, crab rides, rolling back takes. That's their whole game. But they're training against resistance and they compete, especially if they compete. They are 100 times better at self-defense than a guy who just practices the self-defense techniques in isolation. Now, obviously, that's a false dichotomy. You could do both. And if you did self-defense, especially sparring with knives or sparring with guns, the way somebody like Burton Richardson does, JKD Unlimited, where you're pressure testing your ability to roll in the presence of a knife on the mat, and there are various safety protocols that you have to employ there, because obviously things can go pretty sideways pretty quickly, then that is the most self-defense relevant thing. But if you had the choice, if the false choice of just pure sport jiu-jitsu, following whatever the latest crazy meta is, lapel-assisted 50-50 guard versus the best, full of hip throws and full of, standing figure 4 locks against people attacking you with a knife, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu self-defense curriculum.
We nearly added that in the book, didn't we?
Oh,
One of
well,
the first techniques that Graham suggested was the standing arm lock, where somebody just leaves their arm out like this, and you wrap it over and do a figure four on there. I
oh,
know you
standing
must
Was
have,
it?
figure.
yeah,
I've
and
got no memory of this.
you wrote about it anyway. You wrote about it,
Did
and
I?
I said to you, no one ever does that technique, Graham. He goes, yes, they do. And I said, and we had a long, and I thought this is not going. This is one of the first things he wrote, and I thought this is not going well. This book is not going to happen. I think after a while, we looked it up, and I think we just dropped it because it just.
Standing wakigatame does work. I mean, it's a vicious technique, and it's a standing arm break. It's been used in MMA, and it was used in judo for quite a while. But it's not controlled. You're just basically grabbing the guy's wrist and then throwing the side of your body at the back of his elbow, hoping to snap his elbow. I mean, drive him to the ground where you can then continue your judo newaza. When you want to write the self-defense version of this book, let me know.
I think
I never want to write a self-defense version of this book.
we have talked
it's
about
not,
what to
it's
do
not a
after the
subject
book.
I'm interested in.
We have talked about what
Sorry?
to do after the book. It's very hard to pitch where to pitch the voice of the book. We've kept it very, very simple, very direct, conversational, if you like. Graham's kind of chatting to the reader, saying what you want to do here is, etc., etc. Kind of that tone, which I think fits in with the modern readership. But it's very direct, and here is the concept. Here are the techniques that fit the concept, but there are plenty more that we can explore. But something I felt I wanted to add to the book that we just didn't have because of space were a deeper discussion of the concepts of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, base, leverage, timing, all sorts of things. I've got a whole list of them, and then it dawned on me that it's meaningless in a way to a beginner. Yes, concepts are important. People teach Jiu-Jitsu conceptually. You mentioned Greg Suder's. In a way, a lot of the ecological jiu-jitsu conversation is based on concepts. Here's a concept, let's fit a game around it. I don't see how this book still can't apply to that. But anyway, the idea of conceptual jiu-jitsu is important, but I think it is something that instructors love because they already understand the basic nuts and bolts of jiu-jitsu. The beginner coming in, a concept is interesting, but they still need to know the nuts and bolts, right? So we kind of left most of the concepts out, and maybe we'll put them into something else that comes along in the future. How you draw that, I don't know, but it's a good discussion for debate.
The text talks about concepts, but the illustrations are technique based. I'd say the whole book is a mass of techniques, and I think that visual learning of techniques is a learning style that has been underserved, I think, in the jiu-jitsu community, because nobody makes books like this, which are, because Seymour's hand illustrated each of these techniques. That you get books that are photos, but there's just something different about having a hand-drawn illustration that's much more clear, and in a way, I think it's somehow better than video, because sometimes video you can watch it, then you've got to kind of watch it again, and then you try and remember it, and you can't. Whereas still frame pictures, you can kind of take a snapshot in your mind of each bit, and hopefully, well, it works for me anyway. I can remember them from pictures much more easily. I mean, it's worth talking about how you produced this. There are over 970 illustrations in this book, so it's worth talking about how you produce those, I think, as well.
That's all right with you, Stephen. I'm happy to talk about that. So this inspiration for creating a diagram line art based instructional was based on judo manuals from the 1940s, 1950s. You may indeed have some on your bookshelf. If not, you've definitely seen them online. Going further back, when Jiu-Jitsu first became popularized in the West, which was the late 1890s to the early 1900s, some of those books were illustrated with photographic plates, you know, where they take the thing out and these people had to pose there, and a lady would be wrist locking an assailant and there'd be a caption. But most of those books were hand drawn because that was a skilled task of that was around draftsmen who would draw beautiful, highly accurate, simple line drawings. for all sorts of instructional content, as well as newspaper editorials. But a lot of the Jiu-Jitsu books had those, so I've collected a few for my own collection. They're kind of hidden away, so I would have brought them, but they'd fall apart if I opened them because they're that old. I thought, why can't we bring that back up to the modern age and do my version, my interpretation of those? Because I've seen a few other people doing similar content online. There's a couple of good artists out there doing line drawings. I have a certain style that I stuck to, which I think is unique to me. The process was once we decided what techniques to depict, I'd either film myself doing the techniques with my student, which I found hard because it's hard to direct myself when the camera's over there and I'm here, and I never really got the best angle. So I found that it was best for me to act as the film director and get two students to do the techniques, and I would talk them through it. And I could just film the whole thing, take a different angle, film thing, and then I would freeze frame the parts of the video that I thought were relevant to the step-by-step sequence. And then I would take that freeze frame, put it into my iPad, and just trace over it. Now, you'd think that was a simple process, no skill involved. But when you trace over a photograph, everything is wrong. Heads are too big, hands are missing, somebody reaching out to the camera, you have foreshortening, all sorts of things which do not translate to a 2D line drawing image. So my skill is in playing around with perspective, shrinking things, adding things, morphing things, so that the line drawing looks beautiful and logical for the brain to interpret, as opposed to just something traced over a photograph. So can you imagine 970 drawings, and the bulk of that I had to redo. And of course you have to have consistency. So something I started a year ago, to my eye looks very different because I've improved on the way I drawn them, 900 drawings later, to the most recent chapter, which was the defense and escape chapter, which I think I think we perfected our production process for that chapter. That's our best chapter. So that's the process. It takes a long time. I was up till midnight, 1 o'clock every night after my day job, after training. I'd come home and I'd just draw. For a good, I'd say a good solid 6 to 7 months of drawing every night. And sometimes they just didn't work. Sometimes we just dump the technique, and that'd be like a week's worth of drawings gone. But it's for the sake of the book. Nothing was precious to me. If Graham thought that was not working, that technique had to be dumped, we would dump it. I'd just move on to the next one. Or equally, if Graham would suggest something, and I'd say, no one does that technique, and he would show videos and go, okay, people do that technique, and we'd have a lot of debate back and forth. I joke that I probably spoke that during that period of book production, I spoke to Graham more than I spoke to my wife. So he was my book writing jiu-jitsu wife, and my actual wife was in the periphery in the background watching TV. I go, you talking to Graham then? Yeah, no, it's the right hand. We use the right hand to grip the pen. No, I use the left hand. It was fun. I tell you, we're kind of in mourning now because we finished that process, and Graham's often sends me a pitiful message saying, I don't know what to do with myself now. We're not doing this book anymore.
Yeah, what do I do in the evenings now after? No, when the family's gone to bed, I'm used to spending 2 hours writing captions for illustrations, and now I've got all this free time. I don't know what to do.
The highest praise I can give this book is comparing it to one of my favorite martial arts books of all time, which is for a martial art I don't practice, really. There was a book, I want to say it was written in the 80s, called Aikido and the Dynamic Sphere. Have you guys ever looked at that?
Yeah, I've seen it.
The illustrations in there were so well done that it made me feel like, first of all, that Aikido works, and number two, that I could do Aikido.
Wow.
If I just went, whoa, and like did this big motion, that the person would certainly go flying across.
And were they drawings?
They were drawings. They were drawings.
I must check that out.
Of course, the hakama, the skirt, did help with like these flowing motions. There was a similar book done in a similar style called, I think, The Secrets of the Samurai, which had a whole bunch of line drawings representing various aspects of life in medieval Japan. Picking up your book or reading through it, it gave me that same kind of feeling from Aikido and the Dynamic Sphere. It's like, oh, I can do Aikido. I'm John Wick. I know Kung Fu. And I can do jiu-jitsu. Of course, I already know how to do jiu-jitsu a little bit.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. I must check that out. That's lovely to hear. One of the things I wanted to say was we were very conscious of representing a diverse array of figures. I mean, these are real people. You can't tell because I've anonymized them, but I wanted to make sure that there were women in there were men, and there were different shaped men, different shaped women. Possibly you could tell the ethnicity by the shapes of their outlines, but obviously all being line drawings, that was taken out of the equation. But all the models we used, all the students, all the partners, all the friends who models for us, a very diverse array of people. I don't know why that's important. For me, it was important. I think Graham, for you, it was just a consequence of the people that we used. But I just felt that was a picture of today's modern jiu-jitsu community that we have. I hope the book reflects that, but in a way it doesn't reflect it because these line drawings take away a lot of the personal features of the human. You're not distracted by someone's color of their skin or the shape of their hair and you know the brand of gi they're wearing. So yes, I made everyone bald. All the men are bald and all the women have ponytails. But I don't know. I just felt that was a
I
very
will accept
interesting
that.
thing.
I will accept that as an homage. So thank you very much. You're only human after all.
The problem was some of the students I filmed and drew, some of the younger guys, they have this big hair where the flop goes down here, and it made it very hard to draw the outline of their heads. So they won't recognize themselves. So I had to again use some artistic license and redraw their faces. So when I say, "Hey, you're in my book," and I go, "Where?" I go, "Well, I kind of changed it, so you're not really in my book." Anyway, that was fun. Just I could nerd out all day about the little idiosyncrasies of creating the drawings in this book.
So where can people check it out? Where can people see what's in it, and where can people grab it?
Okay, so the plan is to offer a pre-sale on my website, meerkatsu.com. Go into my website, you pay for the book, and then after a couple of weeks, once we know how many people are ordering the book, we'll send those numbers to the printers, and the book printers will then produce them, send them to our Meerkatsu store, and then we will ship them out. So we estimate that in that process, a customer could wait about a month for a pre-ordered book, which I don't think is too bad. It's an independent published book. We're not putting this on Amazon, and there's a reason for that, because
What is the reason for that?
it's not political. It's mainly because, first of all, Amazon is awash with AI written BJJ books. You can't tell one book from another. If you don't know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, you're just going to order something that looks interesting because it has an AI cover and it looks quite cool, and it's all written gobbledygook, as far as I'm concerned. Graham made this. He's part of the problem. He writes about AI, right? So he may disagree with me. Also, Kindle Direct Publishing are wonderful in that they've opened up the doors for independent writers to produce content and make it public. They've cut out the middleman. But the quality of the books...
So that's when Amazon does the printing and the delivery for you, essentially.
So I could dump this PDF onto Amazon Kindle. I already have a few titles on there anyway, just some coloring books. But the printing is not artisanal. You don't have control over the printing. The pages are thin. The hardback is floppy. The printing quality is not at the right dots per inch. I have control over how this is printed. I can take this to the printer. I can talk to the guy. I can say, look, I want this grams per square meter of hardback. I want this grams per square meter of paper. Can you print this page at this clarity? And this tonal gray is too much. Can you reduce the tone by 10%? Can you use a different kind of glue because this glue is not so good? And you can control every aspect of bookmaking. The art of bookmaking and bookbinding is now reduced into a very small, almost like craft. It's still popular, just like vinyl records are still popular. I wanted to be a part of that production where I could say, we made this and we use these sources to really make it and put it in your hands. It's an artisan's product, it's a craft. We want to use craftspeople to make it. It's not just some gigantic megalith corporation churning out easily made books which you're going to put on your shelf and forget about, and it'll fall apart in 1 year. This book will last longer than you do. I'm very passionate about that. Obviously, as an artist, I want to support other arts.
So Meerkatsu.com.
Meerkatsu.com, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really liked it, and I think other people are really going to like it. I wouldn't have compared it to my favorite martial arts book for the martial art that I don't practice if I wasn't convinced that this is a good book. So thanks so much for spending those many, many, many hundreds of hours doing those many hundreds of drawings that are in this book, and the writing, because the writing is also really clear and really easy to follow.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having us on.
Take care.